Our opening words. Welcome, you who are weary, you who dragged yourselves here, you whose hearts are heavy and full, you are welcome here. Welcome, you who are joyous, you who came willingly, gladly, you with good news to share, you are welcome here. Welcome, you who are wary, you who are nervous and unsure about what you'll find here, you who are bravely trying something new, you are welcome here. Welcome, you who are at ease, you who are elders, pillars of this community, you who have tended this hearth fire, you are welcome here. Welcome, you who are seeking, you who are searching for spirit, thirsting for the divine, you who are reassembling beliefs from old and new, you are welcome here. Welcome, young and old, sure and doubting, black, white and brown, male and female and transgendered, gay and straight, pagan and Christian and Jew, atheist and agnostic, introvert and extrovert, wealthy and homeless, single and coupled, visitor, friend and member, you are welcome here. Come, let us worship together. Spirit of life, in this quiet time of reflection and meditation, let us rest in the stillness of this ancient place. Let us give ourselves over to this ancient longing for meaning and community. Let us open ourselves to the sustenance of music, candles, companionship, prayer. Let us add our intentions to the healing energy of gathered compassion. Let us refill the wells within ourselves of patience, empathy, love. Let us bathe in forgiveness and understanding. Let us strengthen our grip on justice. In the quiet of this moment, let us pray. I invite Roger to give our first reading this morning.
Our first reading is a poem I wrote some time ago called Taking Flight. The gaggle of Canada geese on the lawn appeared to be growing each time I looked out, until by high noon all the silence was gone, quite lost in the quacking and the brooding about. 100 or more of these flyers convened, displaying the anticipation of flight, like timid air travelers checking out screens, assuring themselves that the sought gate was right. Then suddenly, all of them, as if on cue, stretched their necks to the south and cried out in one voice. Their focus was total. I'm sure they all knew. Migration, though risky, remained their best choice. As quickly as their honking chorus began, it stopped without a single bird taking flight. Perhaps they had practiced some sort of a plan, or cowardly chose to give up the whole flight. A single goose suddenly shot from the edge, soon followed by 5 or 6 more in a wave. that circled and circled, then formed a small wedge, aligned heading south on a quest for the brave. This pattern continued as long as the flock could safely depart with the help of the light. Remaining geese took to the pond as a block, all huddled together for fear of the night. The geese had all left when the winter snows came, and I'm sure that the springtime will greet their return, repeating a pattern, quite likely the same, that migrating species at some time all learn. Take heart, pioneers, at the risks that you take. Ignore all the homebody geese and their schemes, for boldly you soar on the choices you make. Aloft you fly free in pursuit of your dreams.
In honor of Black History Month and on the subject of leadership, Roger has chosen as our second reading this morning excerpts from Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail. And before I read it, I just was reminded to update you that I spoke a few weeks ago about the NAACP calling people to come down to Raleigh for a mass moral march. And Unitarian Universalists from all across the country responded to that call, along with people of all faiths, and reports say that close to 80,000 people were in Raleigh that day, February 8th. My dear fellow clergymen, while confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling my present activities unwise and untimely. I am here in Birmingham because injustice is here. You deplore the demonstrations taking place, but your statement, I am sorry to say, fails to express a similar concern for the conditions that brought about the demonstrations. I must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the past few years I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set a timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from good people of will is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. Though I was initially disappointed at being categorized an extremist, I gradually gained a measure of satisfaction from the label. Was not Jesus an extremist for love? Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to those that hate you. Was not Amos an extremist for justice? Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Was Paul not an extremist for the Christian gospel? I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Jesus. Was not Martin Luther an extremist? Here I stand, I cannot do otherwise, so help me God. And John Bunyan, I will stay in jail for the rest of my days before I make a butchery of my conscience. And Abraham Lincoln, this nation cannot survive half slave and half free. And Thomas Jefferson, We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists will we be?
Truth, justice, love, equality, leadership. We throw around abstract words today under the illusion that we all know what they mean. We see talking heads on the news passionately fight for, or yearn for, or scream about values, whatever that means. We fill TV screens with images of passionate people who are either vile or heroes, depending on one's point of view. And in the end, we all go away frustrated and upset that no one has changed, especially those on the other side of the argument. I've always been fascinated by the way we use opposite words to describe the same reality. You are stingy, but I am thrifty. You are stubborn, but I'm persistent. You are picky, but I am meticulous. So definitions can be misleading. Sometimes the best approach is to give examples, pulling together aspects of what a reality is, such as true leadership. And over the years, that's how I came to my understanding of leadership. Mind you, I make no claims that these elements are complete, nor that they are exclusive. But I'll take them one at a time. Intuition, or what I call the aha moment. Intuition means instant frustration. As an intuitive person myself, I can quickly grasp an idea, a concept, a vision. And many years ago, I thought that everyone experienced life the same way. I would get angry when someone would say, "How do you know that? Prove it." I had not worked out the steps, so I couldn't provide the information. Fortunately, not everyone is intuitive. We need people who force us to work through grand ideas. Why? Because not every idea is good when you think it through. Linear people are the masters of logic and can pull in the reins on intuition. Intuition may be instantaneous, but explaining it takes forever. Even worse, intuition accounts for only a small percentage of the homework that must follow. People of grand ideas, like Albert Einstein, need to be reminded every now and then that they forgot to put their pants on in the morning. Let me add a word about playing the prophet. A prophet is not meant to be one who predicts the future, as much as it is one who learns to read the signs of the times. Part of the experience is intuitive, and part of it is observation. When read properly, the signs foretell what will happen if all things remain the same. There was no weather station prior to radio and television, so farmers and others read the signs of the times. Sometimes we can choose to deny the signs, especially when they suggest something we don't want to hear, like global warming. Passion and motivation. A leader burns inside with a vision that refuses to go away. At times it can appear to be an obsession. So let me ask, what rocks your boat? What burns inside you so strongly that you cannot deny it? We all have a cause, something that we get passionate about, something that occupies our waking hours, something that we enjoy spending time building or doing. For some, it might be Cherry Garcia ice cream. For others, it might be the Plymouth nuclear power plant. And for others, unfortunately, Britney Spears. Many of you remember, perhaps, young Matt Dutton. He was a young man, a ginger boy, who joined the congregation here the same time that I did. Matt has now moved to Richmond, Virginia, where he moved to be close to his aging grandmother. He works as a barista at Starbucks on the campus of the University of Virginia. But Matt has a passion. He's building a Gothic cathedral in his apartment out of cardboard. Over the last couple of weeks, he has added 2 bell towers and some stained glass windows, all of his own creation and design. To hear him describe it, he actually gets tortured, obsessed with understanding how a Gothic cathedral was built, how it holds together. He has researched concepts linking different elements of his cathedral, such as to St. Michael the Archangel for his angel window. And he found these connections I had never heard of from obscure commentaries in the Middle Ages. He wants to get it right. Motivation might be compared to the high-octane mix that fuels us when we grow tired or lose our focus. Why would Matt go through all this trouble? Well, he lost his mom years ago, and she was his link to reality. Recently, he received custody of her cremated remains. His cathedral is a shrine to honor her memory. This drives his passion. Let me give you another example. When I made the decision to lose 100 pounds, I needed something to motivate me after the initial enthusiasm. I imagined how life would be different when I reached my goal. All too often we begin with vague goals and never take the time to visualize the final impact. Then I broke down the big goal into increments or milestones to measure my progress. I took time to celebrate the progress with small rewards. I also realized that I needed to answer an answer to the question, am I there yet? I needed to measure my progress with concrete ways, not with just pointless ideals. I recall being in a workshop once when the facilitator asked us to come up with some goals. And one person piously stated, I will love everybody in the whole world. The facilitator replied, that's pure bull. You never know everybody in the whole world, and just how would you measure that? A leader keeps the goals clear, practical, and measurable. Those abstract words I mentioned at the beginning cannot serve as goals, but they can be part of the process. To want freedom for everybody can't be measured, but to free a group of political prisoners in a specific jail can be measured. Organized. A leader needs to be a master of self-knowledge. Above all, this means to understand, identify, and accept one's abilities and shortcomings. Not everybody is good at everything. I've known people who are great at launching new projects, but then become the project's enemies when they fail to get out of the way. A great leader not only embodies self-knowledge, but can also recognize the talents in others and can motivate them to join. Now that requires humility. And there's another one of those wonderful abstract concepts. Charles Dickens was great in inventing, remember Uriah Heep, who kept repeating how humble he was when he meant he was shy. This may surprise you, but truly humble people are those who accept who they are, what they have to offer, and get down to doing it. Malcolm Forbes is credited with saying, never hire someone who knows less than you do about what he's hired to do. Humility is that acceptance of who we are, what we are capable of doing, and of deferring to someone more qualified when needed. Leading and managing. A leader knows how to carry people along. My brother Jude, a school principal in New Hampshire, told me of a conference he attended on leadership, and he explained the difference between leading and managing. The speaker laid out a piece of rope before them. He took one end of it and slid it along the table towards the other end, and it became quite muddled. That, he explained, is managing a project. Then he grabbed the end and pulled it along, and the entire string straightened out and followed his tug. That, he says, is leadership. You can't lead from behind. In the Middle Ages, kings went into battle along with their soldiers. Seeing him there served as an inspiration and gave them the vision they needed to face death. Sometimes king died along with their men. That's something we no longer see in Washington. Sensitive to process. The geese in the reading were also examples of leadership. I have no idea how the flock decided who would take off next on the migration. Perhaps there was no central decision process, but there was a system at play. All of them knew that the time to migrate had come. All of them gathered in anticipation. The quacking may have been the tool to let other geese in the area know that the time was ripe. Together they confirmed the direction that they would travel. Then to me, the amazing thing was they all grew quiet. I have no idea why. Yet one single bird took flight, spiraled overhead, gaining altitude, drew a handful of others along, and they all went on a small wedge. The process continued to happen over and over again until they all made it. Structured. When I was teaching scuba diving, we had a few rules that we ingrained in our students. 1, never dive alone. 2, plan your dive and dive your plan. It's not about order, but it's about bringing others along with you. And 3, never hold your breath. Holding your breath can kill you. Structure may be transparent, but it keeps the vision clear among those who journey together. The team leaders, the team members are your allies, they are not your competition. I've led groups of pilgrims to France and Switzerland a few times, and a bit like Chaucer on his way to Canterbury. And I would make clear to them that no project can be so focused that there is no time for people to get to know each other. I would make clear to them, when it's time to pray, we pray. When it's time to play, we play. Projects have a rhythm, and it can never ignore those who participate in the journey. Timing and patience. When all is said and done, great changes do not happen overnight. True leaders are in it for the long haul. For those times in society when needless human suffering is involved, there is never a propitious time. The root of patience is in endurance, as in stay strong, stand tough. Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Gandhi, all these modern leaders were people who chose nonviolence, who were in it for the long haul. I just am amazed that Mandela had the strength of character he did after all those years in prison to still lead his people. A beautiful story appeared on the CBS News last week about a photographer in New Jersey who stored a lifetime of photos in a warehouse close to the shore. He had taken photos for large publications including National Geographic, Smithsonian, and others. When Sandy hit, the warehouse was flooded, and when the containers were open, the emulsions and the salt had an effect in unusual ways. Each had now become a unique work of art, totally unexpected. They were now highly sought and bought, and his only comment was, "We can't control events, just adapt to them." Fearlessness. Recently, David Brooks wrote in the New York Times an article called "Apprentice Yourself to a Craftsman." He says, schools are good for transmitting what the philosopher Michael Oakeshott called technical knowledge. This is the sort of knowledge that can be expressed in rules and put down in books like recipes in a cookbook. He says, but craftsmen possess and transmit practical knowledge. This sort of knowledge, Oakeshott says, exists only in use. It cannot be taught, only impaired by imitation and experience. It's knowing when to depart from the cookbook, how much, and when running a meeting to let the conversation flow, and how much to rein it in. Take a reality bath, he says. Go off and become a stranger in a strange land. Go off to some alien part of this country or the world. Immerse yourself in the habits and daily routines of that existence, and stay there long enough to get acculturated. Stay there long enough so that you forget the herd mentality of our partisan culture. Leaders take chances without recklessness. They take calculated risks. Only the masters of renunciation leave an imprint. Only those who can say 1,000 no's for the sake of an overwhelming yes. Only the person who has burned the ships and committed to one issue has the courage to cast aside the advice of the strategist and to actually push change through. So, when all has been said, the task remains to be done. Who shall we send? A friend of mine, Reverend Roger Plant, upon his election as provincial superior in his religious community, was quite proud of himself. And he went to visit his elderly mother to give her the good news of his election. While sitting there, she listened to him and then disarmingly replied, "Is it your turn?" So, have you experienced an intuition? Have you reflected on how to develop that perspective into goals? Have you shared with others and communicated your passion? Are you prepared to endure the hardship of giving it birth? Is it your turn to lead?